Hey, welcome to our Q&A Tuesday. It is Mother's Day week, and so I thought it would be tremendous to have the greatest special guest that I could ever have. That is specifically my mother, Dana James. Welcome, Dana. I'm so glad. I'm not going to call you Dana anymore. I'm going to call you Mom.
That
Welcome.
just seemed wrong, didn't it?
It did. It's fun to call you Dana. Every now and then when you call me, I say, hey, Dana.
I know, and you couldn't get my attention as Mom. You would go, Dana.
That's right. That's right. It's Mother's Day week, and I'm not typically the best at remembering pretty much anything, especially Mother's Day. So I thought this would be the greatest thing ever, is to put you on Zoom and put you out there for the world to see and let you know how special you are. So how's
Oh,
that?
that is so sweet.
It is.
Well,
Isn't it?
it's the only reason I would be doing this is because as a mom, you want to do what your son asks you to do. Otherwise, why with quarantine hair would I do this?
Your hair looks good. Your hair looks good.
Oh.
You know, one of the things I've been thinking through this, just a lot of the moms out there with the quarantine are having to juggle a lot of things they aren't normally juggling. One being like their husbands being at home with them for a lot of the time. Also having to homeschool, all those kind of things. But I thought it'd be fun. I thought it'd be special to just offer some encouragement to moms. And I know you are a wise woman. I appreciate that about you. Let me just ask you a few questions. First one would be, thinking back of being a mother, obviously you had me.
Hey, I still am a mother.
You still are. You had two of us. And what would you say were your greatest joys being a mother throughout the years? And it may be different along different phases or different parts of the journey, but what were some of the greatest joys of being a mother?
Well, truthfully, this is kind of one of them right here. The fact that you're wanting to do this on Mother's Day and you asked me and you know all the good, the bad, the ugly. So it brings me a lot of joy that you would want me to do this. But I think it goes back, honestly, thinking about the stages along the way, like when you were a baby in the crib, and one of the first joys of when you slept all night. Now, besides giving me the opportunity to sleep all night, what it was is you'd wake up in the night, you would cry, I would feed you, I would change you, I would rock you back to sleep or nurse you to sleep. You'd wake up in the night and you didn't know how to go back to sleep by yourself because you were waiting for me to nurse you or rock you or something. And I realized that as a mom, that I was teaching you to depend on me instead of you wake up to learn how to go back to sleep by yourself. And so I remember thinking, okay, now's the time that you're not hungry, you're clean, you need to be able to go back to sleep by yourself. And just letting you cry it out. And I thought it was going to be years, but it was only a couple of days. And then the first night where you slept all night was like you learned how to go back to sleep by yourself. And so those little milestones brought me so much joy that you take your first steps. So much joy. You could tie your shoe. I tried to teach you to tie your shoe forever. Everybody was tying their own shoes. We didn't have Velcro shoes back then. Why? I would have bought them all. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but when your friend Chad was over one day, he sat down with you for like 2 seconds. And the next thing you know, you came up to me and you just showed me that you could tie your shoe. And I didn't even know what he did. But I was like, there was so much joy that you could tie your shoe, that you could, the joy when you got your first job, the joy when you and Nikki married and you went to her for the things that you used to come. See, this is going to make me cry. Me for, but it's weird to think that the things that gave me the greatest joy were the things that were making you more independent. Yeah. So besides the fact that you and your sister both know the Lord and walk with him, and you and your spouses are raising your children to do that, that brings me a lot of joy. But it's oddly that those little steps of independence, when as a mom, I want to hold you close, but I knew that my calling wasn't to just hold on to you, but to teach you to do the things independently. And um, I got as much as I wanted to protect you,
Yeah.
that really my role was to prepare you for the falls and the disappointments and all that. So I don't know. There's so many little joys along the way. I guess those
Yeah.
milestones.
Yeah. So I love that because there's a sense in which sometimes the greatest joys are some of the most painful things too, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so having to see those, it's interesting too with what we're going through. Some of these big milestone moments for parents are being missed. Graduation, um, proms, sports, some of the things that you really take joy in as a mom with your child or your teenager are missing some of those things. Kind of reflect on that. How do you think moms should process that and think through those things, missing out on those?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny because I have been thinking about that because we have friends that, whose kids are graduating. And part of it is when you guys were going through that, I remember I was almost reliving those experiences in my life. And so one of the hardest things for parents is they're not, it's kind of honestly maybe even a selfish thing because as a parent, we're not able to experience those things with our kids. And
Yeah.
so maybe it's even harder on us as parents than it is the kids who don't even know what
Yeah.
they're
They don't know
missing,
what they're missing yet. Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And to how everything that we do as parents, our kids watch how we respond to it, and to not respond and, oh, this is terrible that you're missing all of this, but how to turn it into seeing, okay, God is not surprised by this.
Yeah.
He is not taken back by this at all, and how to word it and to walk through this season in a way that's healthy for the kids as opposed to what they're missing. It's sometimes it's a selfish thing, it's more that what we're missing
Yeah.
as the family.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and those joys, are important. Looking back, you've been through a lot, just raising us and all those kind of things. What do you know now, right? All the years of experience, you've done a lot of women's conferences. You've been around the block talking to a lot of different women about different things. So you've had opportunities to not only have your experience as a mom, but learn from others as well. What do you wish you would have known at the beginning of your journey of motherhood that you know now that you could tell yourself? Like if you could go back and tell yourself, you need to know this, what would that be?
What advice would that be? It's funny that the first thing that comes in my mind is that I wish that I had known how to be a godly mom and raise godly kids and godly teenagers who would then become godly adults, because I really never had that. I didn't have that example. And I wish that I had known how to do that well. And because I didn't have that, just taking advantage of, I wish I had taken more advantage of the people in my life, in our churches and so forth, that I could sit at their feet. There were several women who had godly teenagers. I remember one in particular who was on staff with us in San Antonio. You were probably too little to remember, but I know you know about the Cooks. And they had 6 kids, and 4 of them were in our youth group. And I remember sitting at her feet and just wanting to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I wish I had known more about how to do that. I wish that I had known how fun it was going to be and how fun it is after the kids are gone. Because for me, my being a mom, the minute you guys were born, it was 24/7. I felt like everything that I said, everything that I did, every expression, every decision, every choice mattered, and it affected how, the choices that you guys were going to make. And so when you, as the last one, went off to college, I remember how freeing that was. Not that the responsibilities were over, it just that it was really fun, because I thought it was just going to be really hard, because it was, you encompassed so much of my life. Even though I was working, did have a ministry, I was a wife, but still every breathing moment was focused on that. And I was afraid that when all that was over, that it wasn't going to be any fun. But so I
Yeah.
wish I had known that. Um, so yeah, those are two
Yeah.
I can say is
I think that's great. There's a sense in which um, learning to lean in the wisdom of others along the way is important, right? And that's why we're doing this, right? Because a lot of times moms feel alone. They feel lost, especially on the spiritual side. The
yes.
I think that all the research shows that parents understand the importance of passing faith to their kids, things like that. But there's a sense in which sometimes we get lost in what do we do. Like it just can seem overwhelming. It can seem frustrating along the way. What are some things that you did, whether intentionally or maybe looking back unintentionally, that you think helped shape mine and Ashley's life spiritually? That were like, wow, that was really good. I didn't even know that was going to turn out the way it did, or those kind of things.
It was always really important to us to make sure that you had other people in your life besides your dad and I to invest in you and to pour truth into you so that you didn't see it as just something that we believed, but that it was biblical, it was scriptural. And I think it's really neat how, because we didn't have grandparents really close to us or even godly grandparents, that there were people in your life that invested in you and poured into you, so that added to what we were already doing and reinforced what we were already doing. I think that's really key, just to not feel like that all the love and everything has to come from us, that that we don't have to be jealous of your relationship with other adults.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. That's great. Um, a lot of moms are carrying a lot of pressure right now in the midst of this pandemic. There's, especially with the homeschooling side of things, right? There's this pressure that I've got to. We're all getting a lot of emails from teachers and schools, even the church. You do this, do this, do this, and there's so many options. And there's this feeling of if I don't perform, if I don't make this thing happen, then my kids are going to be failures, and this, and that goes beyond just this pandemic. But I know you do a lot of speaking, a lot of just investing in moms and women, of just perfectionism and just the pressures of what you carry. Speak into that a little bit. Some of the truths that you've learned through your journey. Some of the things that you share about that.
Well, yes, there is a lot of pressure on us as women, not just women, but obviously men too. But since we're talking about moms in particular, and the pressure comes from so many different areas, it can come from the media. It comes honestly from us looking at other moms and the way that they do it and making assumptions that they're doing it better than we are. The pressure can honestly come from our own mothers or our own mother-in-laws. I hope I don't do that to Nikki, please. Or even like you said, the church sometimes puts pressure on us. Most of all, what I find is most of the pressure, and I would also say Satan, because he wants to get us so distracted on what's um, pressing instead of really what's important and what's precious, so that we're busy doing all these um, urgent things instead of the important things. But a lot of the pressure, besides those things, come from ourselves. And we put all this pressure on ourselves to be, super mom, and to do all the things that you were just mentioning, all the school and all of the opportunities that are out there on the internet, that we should be taking advantage of it all. So I would say take a chill pill. I would say let God set your priorities. I would say sometimes just try the so what method. So what if we don't accomplish the school within this time frame? Yes, have boundaries. Yes, have schedules. But yes, it's okay to break those rules every so often, and give yourself much grace, I would say, and just allow yourself to, I don't know, see this instead of as a pandemic, see this as a season that we are going through, that it is an opportunity to do things differently and, you know, I don't know, take the pressure off.
Yeah.
Just the funny thing is too is that our kids each have, if you have, especially if you have more than one, we are all on different, we're not all the same, and we do things in different time frames, and it looks different. So take a chill pill.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Yeah, there's just a sense in which we we find the main pressure kind of coming from ourselves. And I think it does happen as we look out, we see what other people are doing, and we see this um, almost a comparison game, I guess, is what happens.
Absolutely.
You
That's
know?
what I would say. I say stop comparing, because we are only seeing a portion of what everybody else is doing. And so it always looks better
Yeah.
from the other side. Definitely. Always looks. And I would say this, and this is something that kind of goes back to your other question, that I wish that I had trusted God with my mistakes more.
Hmm.
And so in this season of all these crazy things, I would just trust God with your mistakes. Um, I can trust God with so many things, but I never really considered trusting Him with the mistakes that I made as a mom.
Yeah. That's really good. Um, you know, mom raising teenager, right? Or soon to be teenagers out there. There's a lot of fear sometimes of, oh my goodness, my kid's gonna become a teenager. What wisdom, what advice, I remember you saying this to me, the choices you make over the next 7 years will make your teenager years, your teen years, the greatest years or the worst years of your life. For some reason, I remember by the bedside, for whatever reason, you telling me that, and it stuck with me. Where did that come from? Why did you say it? What wisdom do you have for parents who have teenagers or about to have teenagers who are kind of wrestling with this reality?
Well, I'm really glad I actually even remember saying that to you.
Do you?
I'll tell you where it stemmed from. It actually stemmed from your sister a
Who
couple
made
years.
terrible choices. I mean, right? Like, I'm
She
teasing.
made so many bad choices.
That's right. I was the good kid. No, she's incredible.
You learned from
She's
her.
gonna shoot me.
No, it's funny because I remember, first of all, I loved my teenage years. And I spent most of it grounded because I made some really stupid choices. But when Ashley was about to be a teenager, I remember her saying to me that she was afraid, like she didn't want to become a teenager. She wasn't looking forward to it. And I think part of that came from, and you may have experienced the same things as growing up, in ministry. And as we had been in, student ministry, we had seen teenagers make bad choices. As pastors, we'd seen families torn apart from, teenagers that made bad choices. So where that came from was based on the fact that honestly and truthfully, it all boiled down to the decisions that you made and the choices that you made. And if you made choices based on the boundaries that we have been setting the first 11, 12 years of your life, and knowing that what the expectations were, and if you know followed those expectations, and the attaboys came and the rewards came, and yet if you didn't, then there were consequences to that every single time, then it was going to be great. But if it's so that you knew that if you made bad choices, that you knew that there were going to be consequences. um, so that's kind of where that came from, and it seemed kind of cut and dry, but it was the truth. I, when I was in college, I took a business law class, and they taught us about precedences and how in law, once you set a precedent, you can always go back and use that as justification for this law. Like, well, it was okay then, so it's okay now. For some reason, that stuck with me as far as when it came to having teenagers. But I knew that it had to start from day one. That
Mm.
once it was okay to do something, I had to think if that it's okay to do that now, then for a kid, it's confusing to go, well, how come it's okay now, but it's not okay later? So making sure that I understood that when I said it was okay to do something, and that it was going to be okay, whether I'm in a pandemic or whether,
Yeah.
that makes any sense.
No, it does. It makes great sense. One of the things that I felt you and Dad in particular did well was this balance of freedom but boundaries.
Mhm.
Um, some things I see having done student ministry and working with families is a lot of tension happens between parents and a teenager in particular when the teenager wants freedom, the parent wants to be able to trust their teenager, and there's this tension because neither one of those are happening.
Right.
And I think you guys did a great job of balancing, of having boundaries for us that were very clear and the precedent was set, right? But at the same time, as we showed that we could be trusted, you were willing. Like I remember, older in high school, people will always ask, what's your curfew? And I'm like, I don't really have a curfew. It was whenever I wanted to go do something, you would ask, what time are you going to be home? And I, at that point, had to think wisely and choose, okay, how do I push the envelope here, but not go overboard?
Right.
But I wanted to honor that freedom that you gave me as
Yeah.
a parent. Speak to the balance of boundary freedoms and some of those things.
That's a good example. I do remember specifically doing that because it didn't make sense to say, okay, 12 midnight when you were done what you were doing at 11. So what are you going to do for the next hour? Those boundaries and that trust was built from day one, from every decision, what, even as a small child. And so those years built up that trust. When the trust is broken, and it was, I can't even honestly
Not
think
for
of
me.
specific examples. I know it must have been
There were
Ashley.
no examples.
No, that's right. It must have been with Ashley. But that, I think it's giving you opportunities at every age to make choices,
Mm.
and giving us the opportunity to watch how are you making those decisions. And so if you wait until you're a teenager to make those decisions for them, then you don't know how they're going to react. But if you've been doing it all along, and this isn't, if you're a parent and you haven't have a teenager and you haven't been doing this, it's not that it's too late.
Right.
It's just that it's harder to break the pattern.
Yeah.
But watching you make choices along the way and seeing how they're done, and then respond to that with correction or whatever is needed, or attaboys.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that Jason Gibson, who leads our Bab Center counseling ministry, who you've met and talked with, um, he always talks about the the last day of your high school year needs to look the exact same as the first day of your college year. Meaning the freedoms that you're going to have, that your child's going to have in college, needs to reflect the freedom they have at the end of their high school years, because there's a sense in which they need to be prepared for that freedom without mom and dad kind of watching, so that they know how to handle that responsibility.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I never wanted it to be where you guys felt like, oh, finally, I'm out of the house. I can do what I want to do. And I would even press it to, well, maybe wouldn't press it. I think it's wise in what he's saying. But yes, I would totally agree
You're
with that.
saying earlier potentially.
Well, just that it's a gradual thing,
Right.
that because, and that's where we have to, and you've heard me say this a million trillion times, where we have to hold on to all things loosely.
Yeah.
Letting you go to a friend's house. Do I trust you to do that? Well, if I've had that, and I think this is another key thing for parents with teenagers, is knowing your friends, having their friends coming to your house. And the great thing about having teenagers at your house, it doesn't matter what it looks like. You don't have to have it all cleaned. You don't have to have it all fancy, but it gives you an opportunity to hear conversations. It gives you an opportunity to get an insight on attitudes and plotting. And I don't know if you know this or not, but I strategically, especially when you're early teenage, where you're not driving, and so your parents are driving you everywhere. And there's something about when you as a parent are driving, you you kind of are become invisible to the kids in the car, and they're just talking and talking and talking. And to learn the art of acting like you're not listening, but absolutely listening.
That's good.
Even when they're on the phone, acting like you're not listening, where they think you're not listening. And I don't mean to
Just the
be
art of
like
spying a little bit, right?
sneaky, kind of. I know it makes me feel guilty about it, but it was it was really helpful because you're seeing the choices, you're seeing the pattern, you're seeing the plans, you're seeing
Yeah. Well,
attitudes.
scriptures talks about, right, the overflow of the heart, right, is what leads to everything. And so by listening and by hearing those conversations, you're able to discern as a parent what's going on in their heart. And that's the motive, right? That's why you're listening. And then from that, then you speak into the heart, right?
Yeah, because see, the struggle we can get into as parents is that it can become about performance. And and I've known a lot of parents with teenagers whose kids performed great. They did every in their heart, so that the minute they graduated and were out of the house, that was the problem because the parents were so concerned about how they behaved in
Right.
performance instead of what their heart was. And so it's more than just what they're doing. It's what's the attitude behind it?
Yeah.
What's the heart behind it? And is that godly?
Yeah. I remember you told me one time, I think it was you that told me this, that college college doesn't make somebody bad. It just reveals what's going on in their heart, right? And
Well, I don't know if
that's
I use the word college, but I will use I strongly believe that any kind of disappointment or any kind of um, challenge or any kind of hurt or any kind of experience in your life, whatever it is, if it's missing graduation, if it's, a breakup, what that doesn't make you bitter. The experience doesn't make you bitter. It just reveals that you have a bitter heart. So absolutely yes. It's because what happens is that we blame, well, I'm bitter and I'm angry because of this situation, but the situation doesn't do that to us. It's already there. We just have not repented of it.
so here's a loaded question, and you may or may not have a good answer for this. How do we as parents, because I'm in the middle of it, right? I've got a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Oh,
I'm trying to
so
figure it out.
hard. No, it's not hard. It's
It is hard. Um,
not. I know it
how
is hard. I agree. It's hard.
how do you shape the heart of your child? Because you're right, that's what matters most. So how do you do that? I mean, there's probably 500 million things you could say, but how would you summarize how you worked to shape my heart?
Uh, I think part of it goes back to the precedence thing, in that the, I remember thinking the first sign of rebellion was the first time your sister, of course, not you,
Amen.
as a teeny tiny little thing, rolled her eyes at me. And I knew at that moment that that needed to be nipped in the bud. So I guess the easy short answer is any attitude that, because, ultimately our goal as parents is to, for our children to depend on God and to go to Him for everything. Where was I going with that?
Nipping it in the bud.
Okay, nipping it. Oh, shoot, a monkey. What was I going to say about that? So,
Yeah.
but the,
Shaping their
the
heart by recognizing the rebellion and
the little things at a time, and pointing that out, and how that is, um, it can develop into bigger, and ultimately we want them to respect the authority of God.
there you go.
And that's where I was going with that. And
Yeah.
so when we see these little signs of rebellion of one, and it can look really insignificant, but to not assume it'll go away, not assume that it's just a stage, because when they're that 2-year-old rolling their eyes, it then becomes that teenager who
Yeah.
is described as the one. So I would just
Yeah.
say every opportunity that you sense anything that is to just sit down and go, you know,
Well, and
address it.
that's where parenting gets hard, not because it's I don't know what to do sometimes as much as it is I would rather just not do it because those are it's because it is so often, right, that the eyes roll and and to be consistent, it requires a lot of emotional draining responses as a parent. And it's easier
Yes.
to just disconnect a little bit and let it go. Especially if
So,
it's
Brandon James, you probably will be shocked by this and don't remember this, but you did have a little a temper
Oh,
as a
listen, I admitted my temper on my Wednesday night study this last week about how I
okay.
may or may not have broken a few tennis rackets on a tennis court.
Well, so like as far as when you say it's hard because it takes time. I can't even tell you how many times we were at the grocery store with everything in the cart needed, and you began to throw a fit where I just as soon ignore it. But I have left many a grocery cart in the store to have to take you out to the car to deal with that. And that's where it does become because it's a lot easier as a parent to ignore it.
Yeah.
But it'll bite you in the end and make and it's not just bite us in the end, but your kid. You know, you want them to.
Well, I apologize publicly in front of all the world for the heartaches that I've created for you in the grocery store.
No, it
It
was
is funny. I
worth
do look
it.
back and I do remember moments of my little tempers. And it's funny because my demeanor now is probably like the most laid back, easygoing, kind of person. But
Well,
uh,
and I
not
will
as not as
admit
good.
he is, and I'll admit even sometimes being afraid to even confront you, even as a little kid. I'm talking little because I didn't want to deal with it. And so I was like, I would almost coddle you to not get you upset. And I was like, wait a minute, he is not the boss of me. I'm
I
the
am the
parent
boss of you.
here.
No, I'm teasing. I'm not. I'm not.
I
Oh
know.
man. One of the things that I remember, and I've said this before in different settings, but for some reason it means a lot to me. You've often told me that there were times, really multiple times, where in the middle of the night you would wake up sensing that there was a battle or a war or something going on for my soul and for my
Yeah.
heart, and you would spend time praying and you would one ask me, hey, is there things going on in your life I need to know about? Are you okay? Even like when I was in college, even as an adult now, it
Yeah.
still happens. So one, I want to say thank you for that,
Oh.
for for taking the time, but just battling for me in that. Talk through that a little bit. What Flesh that out a little bit more, right? Because I think that's an important role as a mom. Because I think there's a sensitivity that a mom has to their kids and the spirit and some of those aspects of it. But talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We know as godly moms that our role is to pray for our kids, and we do that. And I did not do it nearly or still as much as I should, and as fervently and effectively as I should. And it's I think I want to be a life learner on that. There was a particular time though where, and I speak of this often to moms, where I literally felt like I was going to battle for your very soul. And it was during those early teenage years, which are so critical, that fine line between the independence and just being a kid. But during that particular season, it was as if I felt like there was such a responsibility on me to be obedient, to go to battle for you.
Mm.
And as hard as it was, it's looking back on it, I can see what an honor and a privilege to be able to do that for you, like literally. And as I become to understand since then, what when God created me as a woman, He created me as a warrior, an azer. In Genesis, a very strong helper. That word is an azer, and it's even a word that God describes himself as a warrior. And so I remember that specifically being a time where I was literally a warrior going into battle for you in prayer. And yes, through the night. And I'd wake up in many nights. And I still do that periodically. But that particular season, I'll never forget it. It was crazy.
What I guess to wrap it up a little bit with that, just thinking practically, what do you advise moms to pray specifically for their kids? Right, it's one thing to say, hey, you're up all night praying for your kid, and some moms might be like, what do I pray? Like,
Yeah.
what specific things would you say, hey, pray this for your child?
Pray. Now, this is to this day, I guess I should still pray it. I haven't prayed it since anyway, is pray that you get caught when guilty, that you would not get away with anything from day one, any sin, anything that is displeasing to God. Again, whether it's an attitude of the heart, whether it's an action of the will, that you be caught when guilty. I would pray that.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, and I wasn't happy about that, but go ahead.
Terrible. So that's important. And just that I remember praying specifically that you would know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings. And that is hard to pray right there. And that you be conformed to the image of Christ, like it speaks of in Philippians. And praying scripture, anytime you're reading, just praying that over your kids. I would tell moms to pray even the alphabet, going through the alphabet, and just praying for his attitude, praying for a beautiful heart, praying for compassion, praying for deliverance. But as moms, we spend so much time, I find, praying for our kids to be protected from things instead of preparing them for things. And I don't know if I've even said that in this conversation, but that's one thing that I wish that I had held on to more, is it's not my job to protect you. Because then you'll grow up thinking, well, God, how come you're allowing this? If you really love me, you would protect me from that. And God doesn't ever promise that he will protect our kids. He's already prepared a place for us. And what are we doing to prepare our kids for heartache and to prepare them for seasons like we're in right now? So I think that's a big part of praying is praying for ourselves, that we do well at preparing them instead of just protecting them from this crazy epidemic.
Crazy world. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that, if you look at, you see the reality that a lot of kids aren't moving into adulthood, right? And a lot of it's a preparation thing. And so I think it's preparing for life, but it's also preparing spiritually and preparing our hearts to be sensitive, to surrender to God, what he says and what he does. And so that's gold. That's good. Well, Mom, I appreciate your wisdom, your insight, your time. I love you. I'm grateful for you. I couldn't imagine having anyone else. You are the greatest mom of all time. Sorry, other moms out there. It's true. Lived with her.
Nikki.
Well, Nikki is not my mom. And so.
Oh, that's a good call. Good call.
So I can say that you're the greatest mom I've ever had. And she's.
Oh, brother. Well, that takes everything away then.
Right? See, that's easy. That's easy. I got this. No, in all seriousness.
I love you so much. I
love you too.
I'm so thankful for you.
You're too kind. Love you.
Love you.